My, how the time flies. This movie is 45 years old today. What? That really does feel like some bad news, huh? And what better way to celebrate than by taking a look back, shall we? Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to yet another brand new movie review, and as always, I thank you all so much for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy your stay. But this time around, ladies and gentlemen, we are gonna be... I'll be right back. This time around, we're looking at The Bad News Bears, directed by Ritchie and starring the late Walter Matthau as Morris Buttermaker. Now, as some of you know by this point, Morris Buttermaker is a drunken loner and a former minor league pitcher who agrees to take on coaching the North Valley League team, the Bears. And he agrees to coach the team at the behest of lawyer councilman Bob Whitewood, played here by Ben Piazza. And Whitewood's got a vendetta against the league for excluding his marginally talented son Toby from playing, which can only mean one thing: the Bears are the worst team in the league. After failing with his new team of misfits, Buttermaker enlists a couple of new talents to lead the charge. This includes feisty and gifted pitcher Amanda Wurlitzer, played by Tatum O'Neal, and all-star juvenile delinquent Kelly Leak, played by a young Jackie Earle Haley. Now, I mentioned this in my last Blu-ray haul video, but I think The Bad News Bears may be my favorite nostalgic sports movie ever. I'm always so shocked whenever I talk to somebody who's never seen The Bad News Bears, and yet it still feels like nobody's really talking about this film anymore. So I think it's only fitting on this milestone anniversary to bring it back fresh into your minds. If you grew up in the 90s, and if we're stretching it going into the early 2000s, you might have noticed a little bit of a trend with sports movies. That's right, we got a bunch of various sports flicks hitting theaters, and they were all centered around the underdog. You know what I'm talking about. It's the underdog team of misfits who go from worst to first, basically. It's always the worst team in the league who somehow, some way, over the course of one season finds their way to the championship game. And they're all filled with the same cliches. You gotta have all these stock characters on the team, you gotta have the inspiring montage where the team becomes amazing, and then of course you have the big championship climax. The perfect example of one of these is the Mighty Ducks. Now, this should be fresh in a lot of sports movie fans' minds because of that new series or whatever that's coming out on Disney+. But not only that, I can think of various other examples just off the top of my head. Little Giants. I reviewed that one back in September on this channel also. Hell, even The Sandlot, even though I love that movie, it's one of my favorites of all time, but you still have a lot of those cliches seeping through those cracks in the fence, if you will. And all of these movies, I think, owe a debt to director Ritchie and The Bad News Bears, which I consider the prototype for this narrative. There may have been other projects that came along to try and replicate the magic that was created back in 1976, but let me tell you, there was only one sports movie that did the underdog narrative first. This one. And even though there are times, especially rewatching it, where a lot of story elements feel more like obligations rather than unique ideas, The Bad News Bears as a movie really does hit all those story beats within this narrative blueprint perfectly. First and foremost, you gotta have the reluctant coach Morris Buttermaker, played here by Walter Matthau, may he rest in peace. When we meet this guy, he is just a wreck. The first frame we see of him, he's mixing Jack Daniels into an open beer can. This guy has gone completely off the rails. He has theoretically given up and stopped caring. No regard for the world around him or the people inhabiting it. But then he gets this job coaching the Bears, and there is a very noticeable reversal that Matthau had down. And I thought Walter Matthau was such an excellent fit for this role, and I could honestly sit here and argue that this may have been one of the best turns in his entire career. Now, those of you who have seen this film will also be very familiar with the father-daughter-esque bond that Buttermaker shares with young Amanda Wurlitzer, played here by Tatum O'Neal, who, by the way, so awesome in this movie. Amanda Wurlitzer is such a badass with such a mean curveball and a quick wit to go along with it. These are all excellent character qualities, and O'Neal and Matthau play off of each other wonderfully. I love the scenes where Matthau is at first trying to recruit her and she isn't having it, but then, mild spoiler, he tries a different tactic by saying it was a dumb idea for him to even try anyway. And then he goes and says something like she wouldn't have been much help to the team at all. Perfect execution of those beats and a perfect reaction from O'Neal O'Neill as well. I mean, she was insulted. And I also gotta talk about Kelly Leak, played by a young Jackie Earle Haley, who you all might remember from Zack Snyder's Watchmen film. Man, this kid was cool. He seemed like someone you did not want to mess with, in addition to spitting some serious game all over the place. Now, even though this character does feel very one note, he also has a very interesting arc in his own right. Don't overlook Kelly Leak at all. Just watch him after the penultimate game and before the championship. It's quite a sight just seeing his ego crumble all around him. Now, obviously, a lot of these nostalgic sports movies have got to have these cliches. You have the reluctant coach, check. You have the badass girl character, check. And then you have the all-star reject, check. And they all come in to propel the team to the next level. But you also gotta have the other very common stock characters. You gotta have the geek Ogilvy running the numbers, and you gotta have Engelberg talking about how much he loves food, specifically chocolate. And then there's goddamn Tanner Boyle, who is a potty mouth. I mean, the things that come out of this kid's mouth are crude as crude can be. Seriously, I think this kid could give Deadpool a run for his money. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm exaggerating there because the movie's only PG, but like... man. Tanner Boyle is one of the most savage characters you will ever come across, and like... I don't know if I should feel bad about laughing right now, but a lot of his stuff is insanely quotable. And the fights he starts are just so entertaining to watch. I don't know why I always bust up at this scene, but there's one fight that he starts with that Joey Turner kid at the snack shack when he's defending Timmy Lupus. I don't know why, that scene just always gets me. Now clearly this movie has the comedic chops as Michael Ritchie was intending, but on a rewatch, I always forget how deep this movie gets into the themes of competitiveness and the dark depths ordinary people can sink to. And nowhere is that more apparent than Vic Morrow's scene during the championship game on the mound with his son. Man, like, good lord. Now, those of you who have seen this movie will obviously know what I'm referring to, and I'm not going to spoil it just in case, but the stuff that happens in that scene is disturbing. And even more so, it's just the depths that this man will sink to bring his team to Little League glory. But you know what's even more fascinating is that all the kids see right through the grown-ups' bullshit. They are all wise beyond their years, especially this coach's son on the mound. The way he handles that situation I was just referring to is so satisfying. And that's not even just true with the villains in this movie. The heroes all see through Buttermaker's bullshit as well, especially when he starts to go off the rails with his drinking or with his own competitiveness. I mean, smart scripts, awesome fun performances here across the board, mature themes. What's not to like? The Bad News Bears truly is an instant classic, and I absolutely adored how Michael Ritchie approached this direction. A lot of these dramatic moments I was just referring to, there is no musical score. Nowadays, with moments like these, it would be very tempting to put a very somber, dramatic musical score underneath it. Not here. As a matter of fact, the only time the classical musical score flares up are during moments of triumph or at the big final moment of that championship game. This is a very smart and simple way to craft your film because this puts the words, the performances, and the mature themes front and center. Simplicity really is the key to this movie, isn't it? Now, I really only have one issue with this film looking back on it on a rewatch. This was made back in 1976, which is totally fine. There's a lot of times where the film can feel very vintage, and it's really nice to look at with the costume design. You have the ridiculously old Denny's and Pizza Hut logos on the uniforms, but sometimes this dialogue can feel very dated to me. Not to get too deep into spoilers, of course, because I want you all to check this out on the anniversary. But there's one character that yells out, "This is baseball, not backgammon!" And that's just one example. I realize that's one of the oldest board games ever invented, but like... come on now, who plays backgammon anymore? Anybody? But that's really my only issue with this film, aside from feeling pretty dated and having the obligatory cliches. But I got some news for you. This film did all of those cliches first, and I would argue the best. I'm gonna give the Bad News Bears an A. This is a must-watch every single year, every spring. I adore this film. As I've said, very, very funny, but it also has a phenomenal way of approaching such mature, disturbing themes. Now, there aren't two sequels to this original film, and while I don't think they hold a candle to the original, they're all still very fun in their own right. The remake, on the other hand, with Billy Bob Thornton, Like, why does that even exist? But these are all, of course, just my opinions. What do you guys think of the Bad News Bears? Have you seen it? Do you enjoy it? Do you not? What is your favorite nostalgic sports film? Let's discuss all of these thoughts further down in the comments section, shall we? Because I love making these videos. I love starting the discussion about cinema and all things entertainment, and I love continuing that discussion with you guys. And if these topics sound appealing to you, please definitely consider hitting that subscribe button down below as hard as you possibly can. It's free, first off. It would really help out the channel if you did so. And I'll tell you what, if you hit that notification bell as well, you guys will be the first ones to know anytime a new video uploads over here. And just one last reminder, if you guys liked this video, feel free to leave a thumbs up on your way out. As always, look out for more exciting content hitting this channel very soon. You guys are the best. And with all that being said, back talk, commence!